Highside, Lowside, episode 2 of season 10. I am Spurg and Dunbar. That is my co-host, Zach Quartz. And today we are talking about the Isle of Man TT, and we are joined by none other than Mat Oxley, who has not just covered the Isle of Man as a journalist, but who has raced at the Isle of Man. So who better to talk about that world famous endeavor? Also, we are going to invite you, the audience, to help us plan a future episode and bankruptcy in the eyes of KTM owners. What do we think and what should we be concerned about? All that and much more on today's episode. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Moto is a longtime supporter of Highside, Lowside, and can support just about any of your lubrication and cleaning needs as well. With engine oil for 2-strokes and 4-strokes, chain cleaner and lube for on-road and off-road applications, and dozens more products to keep your machines clean and running smooth. Plus, a little bit of every dollar you spend on Moto products at RevZilla.com goes into producing Highside, Lowside. To learn more about the Moto catalog, you can go to RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL.
And while you're over there on RevZilla.com, make sure you check out the RPM program. That's the Riders Preferred Membership Program, now only $39.99 a year. You get all kinds of discounts on motorcycle gear and apparel. You get $15 for just signing up, free 2-day shipping, concierge service, and it works across all of RevZilla's sister brands. That means J&P Cycles, Cycle Gear, RevZilla, and Rever. To learn more about all the benefits of the RPM program, head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. That's RevZilla.com/RPM. Now, on with the show.
Alrighty, everybody, off we go on another Highside, Lowside adventure. Spurge, you feeling ready? Are you?
I never feel ready, but I do want to start off by saying, since we've recorded the last episode, which was the first episode of season 10, where we had Lance on to talk about bikes that we were excited about in North America in 2025, news has broke that Honda is bringing the Hornet stateside, which is a little parallel twin naked sport bike. And we were talking about in the episode how Honda didn't have a mid-sized parallel twin in their lineup, but they're bringing
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's true. And we have a real live European resident on the podcast today, and Mr. Mat Oxley. So we when he comes on, we can ask him later on about bikes we don't get.
His feelings on the Hornet.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a good call out, and I am excited in general about all those bikes that Honda's bringing. I even like the cut of that NT1100's jib. That's a real Dorcas Maximus kind of motorcycle. That's my cup of tea, as you might say. So yeah. Anyway, to start off the show today, Spurge, as you know, we're gonna start off with a little bit of a quandary to the audience, I would say. Sometimes, as you know, in season 10 here, we're starting off with, sometimes we're making fun of someone's motorcycle or telling you about something we found on Craigslist or whatever. But today, we're batting around the idea of another motorcycle icons episode. Yeah, Spurge? And we
People
did
seem to like it when we
SV650.
did it with the SV650.
Right.
Yeah.
We did the SV650 last season. And it got pretty good response from you, the viewer listener. And we appreciate that. And now it's really like, what bike is next? Because there's lots of options. So I'm curious, Spurge, what do you got on your mind? Anything in particular?
So I think we would be remiss to not listen to our audience who constantly reminds us that we don't spend enough time talking about the motor company. That is one Harley Davidson.
And so, can I guess what your take is?
Take a stab.
Sportster.
I mean, how do you not do a motorcycle icons episode about the Harley Davidson Sportster?
Right. Well, I think that's a good point. And it would
make some HD enthusiasts happy. They would stop, sending us emails talking about how we don't like Harley Davidson and how we don't talk enough about Harley Davidson. I think that would help.
Aren't we going to do it wrong though?
No, we're going to do it right. Trust me. I'm not sure how we're going to do it in my mind, but I think we would do it right. What about you? Do you think like if you had to have your pick of the next icon to talk about from a motorcycle standpoint, what would it be?
Harley Sportster was on my list. I'll tell you that. The other ones on my list were Suzuki GSX-R 750, classic.
You just want to do two Suzukis in a row, though.
You're right. I know. That's not the one at the top of my list. Also, the Aprilia Tuono, which I think is an interesting bike because it's sort of the way that it started and it's developed, and now there's a smaller one and there's an even smaller one in Europe that we don't get, and blah blah blah.
Is that too recent to be an icon, though?
Maybe. Okay, so my last one, I think you might actually try and chew the fat on. No, that's a good one though.
I should have thought of that one.
I'll give you a hint. It's the 50th anniversary of this motorcycle this year.
If only there was an article released on Common Tread today talking about the 50th anniversary of the Honda Goldwing. I wouldn't know what you were talking about if it weren't for Lance Oliver covering that in depth.
Right. Well, we did get a press release from Honda about it being 50 years of Goldwing this year, and if the Goldwing is not an icon, there is no icon. I mean, that is an icon of motorcycling if I've ever heard or seen one. So that would be my only other pick. So maybe Harley Sportster, maybe Honda Goldwing. Is this where we encourage people to send us an email with a suggestion or vote on it somehow?
Absolutely. Shoot an email over to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. Let us know if you have any strong opinions on what iconic motorcycle we should highlight in the next Icons episode. Yes. I think at this point, though, Speaking of icons,
indeed.
This is how we introduce Mat Oxley to the podcast. For those of you that were watching, you know that Matt has been here kind of listening to Zach and I ramble the whole time. If you're listening, Mat Oxley is in the room. He's our guest today. And Matt, I guess we should probably start off by just asking you, what's an iconic motorcycle that you would want to talk about if we were talking about iconic bikes?
So many. I mean,
you probably have some Goldwing experience. I know you're a road racer at heart, but you probably have some time on Goldwing.
I love Goldwings. I went to Le Mans on one last year, and I just kind of, it's just such a kind. I mean, the kind of sporty one, not the kind of full tourer.
Okay.
The kind of sporty.
The one without the top box,
the cut down, and I just enjoyed myself a lot on it. You can be a real hooligan, but the thing about being on that thing that you've got to know when to stop being a hooligan. You know what I mean? Because if you get into trouble on a Goldwing, it's going to be big trouble, right? You got to be well ahead of yourself.
It's like 850 pounds of trouble.
Exactly.
Coming down.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a pretty big chunk of metal.
Iconic motorcycles. I mean, I was always go back to the Honda RC30. The 750cc, it was an F1 bike. It won the first 2 World Superbike Championships, 88, 89. I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually. You think about the 80s, like if you're talking about sports bikes. In 1981, Honda released the CB1100R, right? Which was a kind of limited edition sports bike. And it was enormous. I raced one in 82, 83. It was like a bus. Because I used to ride 252 strokes, and then you got on that thing.
Right.
You think
almost Goldwing size?
6-7 years later, you had the RC30. I mean, just astonishing.
That's true. That's fair.
That kind of period of sports bike development in the 80s, I don't think there's ever been a period like it. You were going from a bus to think that's basically a legal, a road legal race bike.
Right. They just kept jumping themselves faster and faster.
Absolutely.
And faster.
It was just crazy acceleration in technology. Other iconic motorbikes. I mean, I love, the old Ducati 900 SS. So you're talking late 70s, early 80s.
You're speaking,
bevel driven.
The bevel drive. That's one of the first, when I first became a bike journalist, it was one of the first bikes I got to test. I was like 21 or something. And the thing about those things, they didn't even have, no fuel injection, obviously. Not even any, chokes. Do you remember chokes? To start the thing.
Of course. You got to pull the choke out.
Didn't even have the chokes. It just had ticklers, 2 little buttons on the side that you tickled until you could smell the petrol coming out, and then you had to kickstart it. No electric start. And if you didn't get it on the compression stroke, on the right compression stroke, the thing would break your ankle. It would kick back and have your ankle. I mean, so you kind of felt quite cool riding one of those, because just to get the thing rolling, you needed to know what you were doing.
We did an episode last season about like motorcycle terms that people today just aren't familiar with, and I talked about when I bought my first Bonneville, having to have the term petcock explained to me because I had no idea what it was, and I think we did not talk about ticklers, because that was a step before chokes.
Indeed.
And I think you're showing some of the age and expertise that you're going to bring to today's podcast.
Maybe.
Indeed. Well, we appreciate your take on icons there, Mat Oxley. Those are good. I mean, RC30 is a great one. Original, Ducati 900 SS. That's a pretty good one. I think we're gonna struggle to. I appreciate your endorsement of the Honda Goldwing too, because that's if a guy who's embedded and imbued with all of the world championship racing knowledge that you have and Isle of Man knowledge, and you still love a Goldwing, then everyone
it's
can
a
love
kind
a
of
Goldwing.
signal of my age, really. I remember riding to Europe back in, when I was in my 20-30s, and I'd ride down to Dover to get the ferry across the English Channel, and you'd be on a GPZ 900 or a FZ 750 or something like that, the latest sports bike, and there'd be all these old boys on touring bikes, and you just look at them and just think, what are these idiots doing? Why are you on that heap of, huge, heavy, unwieldy thing when you could ride one of these? And now I'm at the ferry sitting. I bought a BMW R1250 RT last year, and it's just, I love it because I can go. It hurts to ride a motorbike now, more than sort of 50 miles, and I can get on that and I can ride as long as I want. Same with the Goldwing, with the electric windscreen, because my neck and shoulders are kind of knackered from racing accidents and so on. So, the comfort sort of. It's a low priority, it's the speed comfort thing, isn't it? To begin with, you're all speed and comfort doesn't really matter. And then it kind of goes like that. And now I'm all comfort. I mean, I like to go fast, but I'm not a complete idiot anymore. Anyway.
So now you're the codger at the ferry who's like, look at these guys on their sport bikes. What idiots. What are they doing?
Well, the thing is, there aren't any of them left anymore. I mean, it is a worry, the kind of, the young kids coming in. So go out and buy motorbikes, kids.
There you go.
Right, there you go.
They're
So
fun.
speaking of the reason that your neck and shoulders hurt, today's topic on the Highside Lowside podcast is the Isle of Man TT, and we're going to talk about all manner of TT facts and history and figures and stories, I hope. But you raced at the Isle of Man TT, did you not, Matt?
Yeah,
I raced. You
history?
won at the Isle of Man TT. Did you not, Matt?
I did, yeah. So I've never told anyone that before. I did. I won a race there in the mid-80s. Should have been 2, but something happened in the other one. There you go.
Okay.
I raced there, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 6 years. Fell in love with it and fell out of love with it, and then fell back. I mean, it is one of those, it's a cliche, it's a love-hate thing. I mean, there's so much about it that you love. And then when things go wrong, you kind of hate it for a while, especially if you know the person that, we know that it's very dangerous and deadly, So it's a real, such an emotional roller coaster, the TT, in every way.
Did you, have you yourself crashed on the TT course?
I have once, yeah. I mean, the thing of, you've crashed at the TT and your first mistake at the Ironman TT might well be your last. It's not like riding around a normal circuit where you'll crash into the gravel trap, maybe even into an air fence, but the TT, you hit a wall at 100 miles an hour. It's not going to end well. I crashed in 86. I'd been leading the race. This was one where I should have won. And I got caught up with some back markers and they cost me some time. And I was just so angry. And coming out, literally the last corner on the last lap, you come out, this rise onto Glencutry Road. And I was just nailing it, not really. And it had been raining and there was some damp patches around. And as I came over that rise, it lifted the back wheel off the ground and I just span out and luckily didn't hit a wall and got back on and finished third. I'd been second at that point and got back on and finished third. So, I mean, I didn't hit anything. So, if you crash at the TT and didn't get hurt, you're quite lucky, really.
I'm gonna back up for a second because let's just assume, and this is the role that I feel like whenever I get Matt and Zach in a room together, I have to like keep some guardrails in the conversation for people that might not know. So let's back up and introduce the Isle of Man TT for that younger audience that Matt and Zach and Spurge are trying to get into riding. Why is the Isle of Man, what is the Isle of Man and why is it so dangerous compared to, closed course road racing?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's a race around the streets, literally the streets. I mean, it's just, if you go out on your road bike and ride to the corner store or ride up into the mountains, imagine that road just being closed off for the morning and the afternoon for 2 weeks for practice. And everybody's coming down past there on 200 horsepower super bikes on slick tires, going absolutely as fast as they can from wall to wall, from curb to curb, probably.
And there's literally there's literally walls when you're talking about wall to wall.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You're riding. I mean, it's a country road it's an island just off the northwest of Britain and, small island. And the one lap is 37 miles, right? about 250 corners in one lap. And you're going through villages, through towns, up mountains, down mountains, through valleys, through alongside rivers, over bridges. You start off at sea level and the top of the course is like 1,500 feet or something like that. So you know, the weather changes, the temperature changes in one lap. You know, it can be raining in one part and bright sunny in the other, you know. So it's an insane thing, you know, and that's what's great about it, right? You know, really that's what's great about it. And obviously if somebody said we've got this great idea now to do it, it would never happen. No way. Right. No way would everybody be going, you are completely insane. We need to lock you up, you know, because this is not the main world. You know?
And to back up to kind of the beginnings of the you know, tourist trophy, the TT, if memory, I don't know a lot about the history of it, but there was something to do with speed limits being instituted in mainland Britain or in mainland England. And they said, well, we're going to go, the guys were driving cars. And then soon after motorcycles, they said like, well, cool. We're going to just like close off these roads. We're going to go as fast as we can. It'll be sort of a test of endurance for the machine and for the drivers and riders and that kind of thing. And I guess, you know, in the context that you're talking about, these, you know, riders nowadays are riding motorcycles that go 160, 180, 200 miles an hour on public roads. But back then, it probably wasn't as crazy a thing, right? It was instead of going 20 miles an hour, you were going 35, and it was probably exhilarating in 1907 or whatever it was, but it wasn't really quite the same thing back then, yeah?
No, absolutely. I mean, it is really interesting how it started because, so as you correctly said, in the late, you're going back to like the 1890s now, right? You know, when the first cars and motorcycles started appearing on the roads, and in Britain, which is our ruling class was all into horses and stuff. You know, they go riding horses and they're all very posh and they hated cars and motorbikes, these horrible, smelly, dangerous things. And they basically said the first rule was if your car or your motorbike has to be preceded by a man walking, holding a red flag to warn everybody that you're coming, right? So you're in your car or your motorbike and you have to employ a man to walk in front of you, right? I mean, this is how it was. And some people were a bit kind of naughty. They'd employ someone and he'd have a pencil with a tiny little red flag on it, just going like that, you know, to the judge. So that was the rule to begin with. And then in about 1890 something, 1897, maybe 1900, they raised the speed limit to like 20 miles an hour. That was across the whole of Britain. You cannot go more than 20 miles an hour. Even so, they weren't allowed, they couldn't close off the roads for racing. But the Isle of Man, which is like a 1 hour ferry ride off from Liverpool on the west, that was under a different legislature. Different people made the rules. And somebody was like, well, if we can't race in mainland Britain, we can race on the Isle of Man. And the Isle of Man were like, yeah, cool. Because they saw it as a way of getting tourists to the island and so on. And so that's literally why it started. It wouldn't have happened.
And what was that prior to 1907?
Yes. So I think the first races they had there was car races and a couple of motorbike races in 1905. The first TT, Isle of Man motorbike TT, was 1907. So that's the only reason it happened, because people couldn't go racing on the mainland in Britain on the streets because there were no racetracks in those days.
And that kind of Isle of Man is still a different jurisdiction or government, right? It's not part of England. It's its own thing.
I mean, it's quite a strange place. They had sort of physical punishment up until recently, about 10, 20 years ago. They had a birch. You know, if you robbed a shop or something, you get beaten. So it's quite an interesting place. It's quite an interesting
That is kind
place.
of emblematic of the type of society or place that would invite people to race around their roads too.
People say, you know, when you go to the Isle of Man, you have to put your clock back, put your watch back to like 1969 or something. No, it's a beautiful place though. It's a beautiful place.
Right.
It really is.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Spurge, I'll let you take it from here.
So kind of focusing on the beginnings and as it kind of works to modern day. And I think for us, you know, this is one of those ones where obviously there's a lot of different in the weeds avenues we could take with this. And what I don't want to do is get into like all the different classes of motorcycles and things like that. But if we could broadly talk about, because you know, Zach's talking about, you know, okay, when we first started going around the Isle of Man, we're doing it at 35 miles an hour. But the machines were obviously did not have the suspension and the handling and the geometry that we have with a modern day machine. So let's just, explore for a second the broad swath of how the machines have changed from when this race was first held to really where we're at now. And even a little bit of the course, right? Because, the course probably wasn't the same as that has evolved.
Sure. I mean, you got to, going back to 1907, so what's that, nearly 120 years ago. So, motorbikes were still a new thing. And as you said, they were very slow. You probably have a 500c single that probably made, 5 horsepower or something like that. I don't know. Maybe did 60 miles an hour. No suspension. Right. No suspension. Not bad suspension. No suspension. Front and rear. Rock hard tires. With all kinds of levers. You not only a throttle, you also had an fuel air lever to adjust the fuel air and then open the throttle.
That was before ticklers.
Exactly. Yeah. Even so, and they had ignition. You had to adjust the ignition as you went around. I mean, these were very strange things. And the reason it's called the TT, that stands for Tourist Trophy. So the whole point of racing in the beginning generally was to test machines, to push machines to their maximum, right? And so the Tourist Trophy, you had to ride a tourist machine, i.e. a road bike. There weren't really race bikes in those days, really.
Right.
So it kind of started off these bikes going very slowly, and the roads were muddy and they had grass in them and there was horse manure everywhere. And they used to, in the summer, they used to put lime, if it was wet, it would be very muddy and the guards would get covered in mud. Almost kind of motocross, if it was dry, there would be horrendous dust. So they used to put lime. They used to spray lime powder onto the dust to kind of dampen it down. But obviously lime powder is acidic, and it was all being kicked up by the bikes onto. So all the riders' clothes would just fall apart, look like they had the moths all over them. It would just, the lime would eat away at them and eat away at their fingers and stuff like that. So it was incredibly feral and backward, and but the TT course, and as you say, it did change over the years. It's been the same now for 110 years, since 1911. The bikes got better and better and better. And like the first year they went to the mountain circuit, so you had this big incline, they started using gearboxes, 2-speed gearboxes, instead of like a direct drive to the rear tire. And one of the reasons the British motorbike industry became so strong, in the early first half of the 20th century, became the strongest motorcycle industry in the world until the Japanese turned up in the 60s. Norton, BSA, Matchless, Triumph. One of the reasons they were so good was because they were racing at the Isle of Man every year. And this was such an amazing test of machines because it was a proper road. So they found out an awful lot about how to make bikes faster, how to make the handle better, et cetera, et cetera.
And the races were long.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know exactly what World Championship racing looked like way back when, necessarily, but it was a pretty specific test of machinery, not just to go around a 37-mile circuit, but to do multiple laps or, there were sort of like, weather and bumps that you might not see elsewhere at a purpose-built racetrack by the time you got to the 30s and 40s and whatever. But also historically those races have been pretty long, right? It's been almost an endurance race of sorts.
No, exactly. I mean, I think the longest TT was a 7 or 8 lap 500cc race. So kind of the MotoGP class, if you like, in the rain, and it went on for over 3 hours. So you're racing around this lethal road for 3 hours. I mean, it's very extreme.
To finish first, you first must finish.
Yeah,
which I think is kind of like,
and just from an American point of view, Indian in 1911, they decided they were going to contest the TT. And I think that was the first time a non-British machine had won. And their machines were just way better than everything. They just got first, second, and third, I think. And they used to do things like kind of pit stops. They'd like eat oysters and stuff. The oysters were kind of quite a kind of peasant food in those days. So they'd, in their pit stops, when they refuel and stuff, they'd have some water, or quite often they'd have a brandy or something like that, in the pit stop, literally, and eat a few oysters and neck a brandy and off they go again. I mean, I would have loved to have been there, right? Because it's so out there, everything now.
Right.
I mean, even at the TT, and that's what's so wonderful about it. Motorsport, because it's a technology race, really, kind of becomes more and more controlled, you know, and the riders become more and more athletic to deal with the stronger forces created by these faster motorbikes or cars. And it all becomes very corporate, and they're all earning millions of pounds a year and flying around in private jets and stuff. And then you go to the TT, and it's just not like that. It's these guys, not, you know, they're plumbers or bricklayers or whatever. And then, you know, some of them lucky enough to go professional, because it's the one place in Britain where you can actually earn decent prize money now. You know, so you know, you can race all year.
Just finishing a race and like finishing third or seventh or whatever, you actually get
the money is pretty good. The money is pretty good. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because for those people that don't know, for those people that might be learning about the TT for the first time, this is still in modern day sense, one of the last great, you know, I don't want to say lawless road races, but like people die, you know, and it's one of those ones where like, it still is this kind of like hearkening back to a different time. But even with that, it's not like the racers are sitting pounding brandy and eating oysters in the pits in between sessions, you know?
No.
So it's settled itself. It's settled itself down a little bit.
Yeah. I think it is literally the sole surviving connection to the very beginning of racing. You know, I don't think there's one anywhere else that's still pretty much the same. And
right.
Over the last few years, I think people in Formula One, which is obviously the biggest motorsport championship in the world. So some of the riders, some of the media people, some of the team managers, guys like Toto Wolff, who runs the Mercedes team, they fly over to watch it because they're just like, wow, you know, this is just, there's nothing like it in the world anymore, you know?
Right. And it's actually, there, like Spurgeon said, there are a million different branches to explore on this tree. So I suppose the conversation is bound to be a little bit chaotic, but you bring up the, you know, sort of last remaining connection of an original race kind of thing. And it's some of you who are familiar with, road racing, or what sometimes is called Irish road racing. There are other events that take place on public roads in, Ireland and Northern Ireland. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Matt, but is the TT the only one that's time trial style? So like the Northwest, that's a race where they race on public roads, but they race bar to bar, which in some ways is crazy. Or they grid up together like a normal race and everyone goes at the same time and you're racing like head to head with these people. The TT is time trial style. So everyone goes in 10-second increments and then everyone tries to beat the clock. And sometimes bikes interact with each other on the circuit, but it's not ever really for position because you're racing the clock more than anything.
Not often, no. So I mean, in the very, very beginning with the TT, it would start with a normal grid, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, off they go roaring down the road. And then after a few decades, you know, they realized that this was getting quite dangerous as the bikes got faster and faster and the road got better and it was just getting more dangerous. So then they went down to, you'd start in pairs at 10-second intervals. And now they start in singles in 10-second intervals. So, you know, there's a real kind of cat and mouse there. You know, where do you want to start? Some guys want to start in number one and have a clear track ahead of them. Some riders want somebody to chase in front of them. It's kind of quite exciting. And obviously now with technology, the way it is now, all the positions are updated all the time. So even though, because obviously it's a 37-mile track, you can't see what's going on. You know, you sit somewhere and poof, they go past you and you see them, 15 minutes later. I mean, it's insane. You know, they go 37 miles and it's just a country road. It's just a winding country road and they're averaging 135 miles an hour.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
Staggering.
No, I mean, you know, it's awesome because you get little villages with a 30 mile an hour sign, you know, and a bike will come through there doing 190 miles an hour, you know, and the trees kind of part because the force of the air is, I mean, it's just, I'm getting sort of tingles down my spine talking about it because it is very, very, very special. It really is.
So in preparation for this conversation, Matt, we were kind of going through and you know, reading up and looking at video footage because there's a ton of great video footage on YouTube that people can find. And one of the ones that Zach sent out was, you know, a full lap with Peter Hickman and some of his commentary on it.
Unfortunately, the back marker really gets in the way through all of this, but there's not a lot you can do about it. So you just need to be patient. You need to try and pick them off where you can. I'm always a little bit cautious when I come against riders, especially riders I don't know, like the guy here. Just got to be careful, take your time.
You know, and just talking about, you the 10-second delayed starts, there's still a lot of like competitive passing that goes on. And I think for one of the questions I have for someone like yourself, one of the things that Mr. Hickman talks about is passing riders you don't know, and how scary that is, because you're not if you're catching up to somebody and you're passing them, you don't know what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Like we talked about earlier, this isn't an open, closed course where you can see through a corner and know where your passing is. You're coming through, and you might have to pass with a building on one side and a stone wall on the other, but you have to make your pass there, otherwise you lose your opportunity. What is that like? For someone that's raced the TT, what's going through your mind with just a regular passing situation in something like the TT?
I mean, if you're in the zone, you just want to get past. I mean, it's different whether you're passing somebody you're racing against or whether you're passing somebody that you're lapping or during practice. And like you say, that can be a bit scary, because slower riders, if you're going super fast, there's only one line, right? Pretty much. There's only one line. You know where somebody's going to go. But if there's somebody slow, and the back markers are pretty slow, they can be halfway through a corner and decide, I actually want to be over there. I don't want to be over here. I want to be over there. So you're going around the outside of them, and suddenly they decide to move over. So, but it's a risk,
What's a bat marker?
A bat marker is, somebody you're lapping, that you might be.
Right.
So I mean, that doesn't kind of happen much in the TT, but it does happen at certain times. So I mean,
especially with the longer races, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're out there for an hour or something like that, you're liable to, like the fast guys are liable to catch slower people.
Yeah. I mean, it is watching the main men like Hickman and Michael Dunlop and so on racing now on like 200 horsepower, 200 mile an hour, or 220 horsepower superbikes, slick tires, they're full kind of world superbike spec. So they generally turn off. One interesting thing, they're all on BMW S1000 RRs, Fireblades, all the latest sports bikes. And most of the riders turn all the rider controls off, because those rider controls are not programmed to be the bike to be jumping 3 times in 30 seconds at 200 miles an hour. You know what I mean? The onboard computer is going to be going, holy, what is going on?
Right.
So they basically just turn everything off.
The bike's going to think it's a crash, basically.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The bike's going to think
so they generally just turn all that stuff off. Traction control, wheelie control, just turn it off. And just
there was one section where Peter was talking about the Crosby jump, and he's like, yeah, I just jumped the bike, and I'm doing about like 175 to 180 miles an hour here. And I'm like, I don't think, unless you've done, let's say for someone listening, you've done a track day and you've come to like the straightaway on the racetrack and you're pinned, even if you're an intermediate rider, you see 150 and your butt starts to pucker and you're just like, man. So to watch this footage where there's stone walls on either side, and he's casually just like, I was going like 180 there as I'm jumping the bike, and then I'm have to get it down in time to like launch it through a right-hander. And you're just like, it
is just mind-boggling, because there is nothing else like it. I mean, as you say, there are other circuits where they race on the street in Macau, on the coast of China as well, but there's nothing like the TT. There's just the way the track is, the way it's not designed. That's the great thing about it. It just follows the roads as they were, like in the old days when they went to the mountain course. Obviously that they graze sheep up on the mountain, right? That's all you can do with that. It's kind of fairly high up. You can't grow anything. And, so that if you were the last rider through at the end of morning practice, you used to have to stop and close the gate. Because, they have a gate
so
separating.
The sheep didn't get
Yeah. You'd have a gate in the road which separates one farmer's land from another. And so you'd have to guide, stop and close the gate and off you go again. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore, But.
Right. That's hilarious. Well, that actually reminds me that the one time that I went to Isle of Man, I was lucky enough to link up with a local former world championship enduro rider named David Knight. We rented some motorcycles from him, and he took us around, and we spectated via dirt bikes by riding around the inside of the island, or the inside of the course, I suppose, because it's a huge loop, right? 37 miles, as you said. So there's a lot of acreage. There's a lot of land in the middle there where you can ride around and you can get to different places on a dirt bike, which was just an amazing way to see the island and to get to some spectating spots that were hard to access and that kind of thing. But the reason I bring it up is that was a few years ago now, I guess it was 2018 or 19 or something. We rode dirt bikes we were going through people's pastures and, where people had livestock and he is a local, so he knew the landowners oftentimes and knew his way around, but we did exactly that. We would go through, this is like not uncommon even in this day and age somewhere that's bucolic and, where there's a lot of agriculture, is if you ride through someone's property, you open the gate to get through on the trail and then you close it behind you so that the livestock doesn't get out. It's, where I'm from in rural United States, that's something that you might see, but in urban and suburban areas, that's just like a hilarious thing that you would be able to just trespass on someone's land, go watch a race. Just as long as you close the gate, everything's fine. That's okay. And I feel like that is kind of emblematic of the attitude on Isle of Man. A lot of times is sort of like, as long as everybody is paddling the same direction and we're all agreed that what we're doing here, then everyone's friendly about it.
Most of the islanders really like the event, even though it plays havoc with their lives for 2 weeks. The roads are closed, you can't get down to the shop to buy some milk, but yeah, I think one of the reasons they like it is because it's important for the Isle of Man economy, right? It's a big boost. It's a big tourism boost. And one of the very important things why it still exists, because, races like that aren't generally allowed anywhere anymore. In Ireland, more and more are being shut down because of insurance costs and so on. You can imagine the insurance costs are pretty high because the risks are pretty high. But the thing about the Isle of Man, because it has its own government, nobody can tell them to stop, right? They're in charge of their own destiny, right? And because it's so important to them, they can kind of underwrite it from an insurance point of view, I'm not, so that it wouldn't exist unless it was on the Isle of Man. So it's kind of come to be and come to survive for various reasons,
Yeah, it is kind of like this racing Narnia. It seems like
that
exists in this. Like you can go through this wardrobe and get there.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just you can't believe it. It's kind of allowed, which again is what makes it so great. We live in a world where more and more people tell us you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then you go there and it's basically go for it. If you want to,
let's
go on.
Go ahead. No, finish.
If you want to risk your life, go for it, mate. If that's what you want to do for a buzz, off you go, and we'll watch and cheer you on.
Right. I just want to explain to people. So I think this is a perfect transition because you're talking about like showing up there and the lawlessness and seeing it firsthand. And Zach, if anybody wants to a little bit more information about Zach's experience and his version of racing the Isle of Man, where he actually lost to Peter Hickman, there is an article over on Common Tread titled "Ari and Zach Race the Isle of Man." But not in the TT. It's an early article with some of Ari and Zach's shenanigans as they were writing this for Common Tread. But I think for a lot of people, the idea of going to the Isle of Man is probably what first intrigues us about the race. I remember the first time that I heard about this, I was a much younger individual, and I was reading a Peter Egan article where he and his wife flew into England. They rented a motorcycle. They took the motorcycle over on the ferry, and they found their corner and they got a pint and they sat down and they watched the races. So I want to jump into like the spectator aspect of this a little bit, both either how do you watch it online or on television, but more importantly, like if somebody wants to make a trip out of this and head over and see it, let's jump into that a little bit. So there's the Ari Henning and Zach Kort's way of like, we're going to go over and get some dirt bikes and ride through some pastures. But I think for a lot of people, it's, finding a corner that they like and posting up. And, what's your experience there, Matt? And how often, you've gone as a racer, how often do you go as a spectator and what's that like for people?
Oh, my main gig now is MotoGP. So you're traveling a lot anyway. It's always end of May, early June. So you're busy with the Italian Grand Prix or all that kind of stuff. So I haven't been for about 10 years. But I would say to anybody, if you can afford a flight to the UK and, you can afford a nice holiday, and you're into bikes, just go, because there is nothing like it on this earth. and it's the last bastion of kind of, do whatever you want, get on this 200 horsepower, if you're qualified to do it. They don't just let anybody rock up, right? But to watch that is it will blow your mind, because you can literally sit by the track looking over a wall and bikes will come past you doing 190 miles an hour, 3 feet away. Right. And if you search it up on the internet, there's a lot of little videos now of people doing just that and just like waiting for the first bite to come and then being videoed by their mate and, who knows what's going to happen. And then they just like jump back in absolute terror, and then climb back up and wow, that was great. And so there's nothing else like it. So I think if you want to go on a motorbike trip, to me, that's what I would do. You could go to Mugello to watch the Italian MotoGP. You could go to whatever, you could go to Kota and watch the MotoGP there. There's just nothing within a million miles of that. So as a spectator, what do you have to do? First, you have to fly to the UK or whatever. And then, I think you have to do it on a motorcycle. I think you've got to do it on a motorcycle. So go to the UK or wherever, somewhere in Europe. You could do it from somewhere in Europe. Rent a motorbike, buy a motorbike. You need to book accommodation. It gets booked up a long way in advance, and the ferries do as well. So it's something you have to plan probably more than 6 months in advance, I'd say, find a nice little hotel in Douglas, which is the main town. The track goes through Douglas. That's where the start finishes. And then you just do all your research into where you want to go and watch. There's a lot of pubs around the course because it's still Britain, right? So there's a lot of pubs. So a lot of fans like to go and sit by a pub and watch, have a pint and watch the bikes go past, and amazing atmosphere. But if you so you do a little bit of that, but also you can, you want to go to one of the really fast corners, like I was just saying, and you have to do your research, because you can't just, you're riding along the road before a race and then suddenly it's like, we're closing the roads, and you just have to get off. So like you say, you have to kind of plan it and either go in the inside and get a dirt bike or go on the outside. You have to really plan the Isle of Man. You can't just rock up there and just expect it all to happen. You've got to do some research. So you've got to get a bike, you've got to get a ferry ticket, you've got to get a hotel, et cetera, et cetera. But it is just for once in your life, I guess, the Sturgis Rally, I suppose, in the States would be similar. For once in your life as a motorcyclist, you're the normal guy, right? Most places on a motorbike, you're the weirdo. Who's that guy in the leathers or whatever, whereas the Isle of Man, it's just motorbikes, wall to wall motorbikes. And it's generally incredibly good humored, good bunch of people having a great time. Right. I just think, if you could afford that kind of holiday, just do it. Because you never know, when they might stop it. I don't think they will, but you never know. Who knows what might happen.
I will say that this part of the discussion, and I have a follow-up question for you about spectating, but Spurgeon described it as a sort of like lawless motorcycle event in some aspects. And it does kind of feel that way when you have someone on a 220 horsepower motorcycle going as fast as they can on public roads, closed public roads, but still public roads. It does feel like a little bit like no rules. And we when I was there, we did witness some of downtown Douglas being a little bit rowdy, but in general, I don't want to put all Britons in a box or anything, but it is amazingly civilized. I felt, and I think it's partly because of that culture, right? Because everyone's there for the same reason. Everyone's there because they love motorcycles, because they love racing, because they want to support the riders, because they want to support the island. And there's just a lot of kind of like, just warm and welcoming energy,
absolutely.
Which absolutely. I thought was really fantastic. My follow-up question for spectating was, do you have a favorite spot or two? I was able to see a few different places on the course, and I know like I ended up with a couple favorites. I imagine you have some too, especially since you've ridden there. Yeah.
The problem is getting to them. And generally if I'm over there, I'm working and so you're not kind of just free to go and do what you want to do. But there is, oh my God, I don't even know the name of the corner. There's 250 corners, right? You kind of forget the names. There's a mega fast right before Ballacrane. So it's about 4, 5, 6 miles into the lap. And there's a farm on the outside of the course. And basically they sort of they build their own little sort of, little grandstand. So I think you have to pay and you go and buy some tea and a cake or whatever. And places like that. What's it called? It's called Glenvine, I think. It's called Glenvine, I think. And that's one of those places where the trees kind of shake around,
like
and,
ripple,
because the
cool.
blast from the bike. And just talking about the lawlessness thing, it is important to understand that the guys doing the racing are taking it very seriously. They're not just maniacs charging around having a good time.
Right.
These are guys that
go
in. I mean, obviously you've got to be crazy, right? That's the number one thing, right? You've got to be crazy. But that's not
they're not maniacs, but you do have to be crazy.
Yeah, no, exactly. But that's not going to get you very far. If you're crazy and that's it, you're not going to live for very long. And so you have to be crazy to want to do it, but then you have to put a lot of work into understanding the course, just knowing every centimeter of it, every meter of it, every ripple in the tarmac, every change of tarmac, every manhole cover, the metal kind of manhole covers, where the tarmac changes, which bits are grippy, which bits are under the trees. So if it's been raining, that might still be wet. You have this vast, and you've got to have like probably 1,000 bits of information about every corner.
Right.
So the amount of knowledge that you have to bring to it. So very rarely pretty much never, in fact, that anybody you just don't turn up at the TT and win the first time, because there's just too much to learn, and you can't prepare for it in any other way except by riding the TT. So it's generally 2-3 years before somebody knows it well enough to actually, win.
In fact, I think they have it's in one of the articles I was reading when I was brushing up on some of my TT knowledge. I saw that they have a list of like fastest newcomer. Yeah. That's like one of the sort of like a rookie of the year style kind of thing, like fastest newcomer ever to get to the Isle of Man. And it was interesting to see there's some big names on there, like Peter Hickman is on there. And there was one or two of the names that I recognized. I'm not looking at the list right now. I can't think who they were, but ultimately like pretty big names in the road racing scene and in the Isle of Man scene. And their first, the fastest they went their first year is very impressive. I think it's 127 miles an hour average or 129 or something like that, which is staggering. But it is, I imagine, a massive gap from going 127 miles an hour to going 133. It doesn't sound like a lot of miles per hour, but you have, considering that's an average speed, that's a massive, massive amount of knowledge that you have to take in and use later.
A massive amount of knowledge. And also, as we all know, that, the closer you get to the lap record, this is counts on a short circuit as well. When you're 2 seconds off the lap record at a short circuit, let's say, it's easy to find 2/10, then another 2/10. But the closer you get towards the lap record, every 1/10 of a second takes 2 or 3
Even
times
harder.
more effort to get there. Risk, knowledge, skill to get there. And it's the same at the TT, so every half mile an hour or even less as you get further and further, you've got to be, and like I say, at the TT, your first mistake could be your last. So you cannot make mistakes. You cannot make mistakes.
One of the things, just real quick, Spurgs, one of the things I really love, as you said, Matt, about the Peter Hickman lap from 2018 that I sent to Spurgeon and our producer to watch, where he narrates after, like that's an onboard video. It's a famous one with the bug on the camera, because it was the fastest lap at the time. So everyone watched that video a million times, even though there's a bug splattered on the camera. And one of my favorite things about the narration is, as you said, he keeps on saying like, you got to keep an eye out for the orange post just next to the tree here coming up. And that's my marker to turn in. And then like, it goes off camber here, and you have to be careful because it's bumpy on the right there. And sometimes there are leaves over there, and you have to be cautious because sometimes if it's wet, he's every single corner and every single part of the course. He has like all this like myriad little things that he's thinking about. And our producer watched part of it, or maybe the whole thing. And he said his commentary on our pre-meeting was, you can tell that he can't even talk as fast as he's thinking. Like when he's narrating the lap, you can tell that he's trying to articulate things that are going through his mind, but because it's so staggeringly fast, he's going through these towns and across bridges, and you can't keep up. There's just no way to, the idea that you can even process that stuff fast enough in your mind, is mind blowing, considering you can't talk fast enough to describe it.
Yeah, I want to shift into some of the racing stuff. I want to shift into some of the more conversations about like the racers in a minute here, but I do want to wrap up one question that I have. And this is something that, Zach, it sounds like if you were there in 2019, you got to experience it. Matt, it sounds like based on your history, you've gotten to experience it, but kind of wrapping up the spectating aspect of this. Cause, Matt, one of the things you said was if you get a chance to go, fly in, rent a motorcycle, get over there, plan a holiday around it. one of the things that always intrigued me about going was up until 2023, there was something called Mad Sunday. And Mad Sunday was, kind of like a day off in between practice week and race week, where if you were over there and you were on a motorcycle, you could go out and you could ride the course, right? And it sounds like, and I learned this in my research. I didn't realize that as of, I believe it was 2024, they've eliminated Mad Sunday. And I'm curious, as to, I guess, both of your thoughts about that. Like, is that something that was, done because we're trying to keep people off the course and too many people were getting hurt? Is that something that
they've actually improved it? They've actually given people more space to go crazy. And this is the road riders. So I mean, if you go over there on a road bike, and I can remember going over there on a road bike the first time I did it, because you go around, because that's how you just go round and round and round on a road bike or in a car, just trying to pick up all the peel-in points and checking out the tarmac and stuff. It's a really tricky thing. So you got to do that. And then you get punters, fans that get up at 5 a.m. Like, okay, so the race.
Can you just explain what a punter is? Really fast? Just explain what a punter is.
So, a fan, it's the middle of summer, so it gets light at like 4:35 in the morning. And, they close the roads at 9 for a race start at 10 or whatever. So you get a lot of guys, the real super keen guys, they go out on their sports bikes, their Fireblades or whatever, and they go up and they try and do it, because once you're out of the speed limits, like out the towns, there's no speed limit. You can go as fast as you like, and especially on the mountain, which that's what they used to do on Mad Sunday, which was this dangerous day because everybody's going out, it's too many motorbikes going in two directions. It's kind of, most people are going in the correct direction, but some people are going the other way because they want to go to the town or the shops or whatever. So they closed the mountain section and made it one way. That's like 10 miles of the course, something like that. And it's the fastest, coolest, but one of the fastest, coolest. I mean, the whole course is fantastic, but it's very fast, flowing up over Snakefell Mountain and then down again. And they used to make that one way on Mad Sunday. It's now one way for the whole week, right?
Oh, okay. So
you can go up there anytime and just go as fast as you like. If you've got a Fireblade, you can be doing 190 miles an hour down towards the next corner, and people do crash and badly, and people are allowed up there in cars as well. So you get people crashing cars, and I mean, it's pretty wild. But it's obviously that's safer, giving somewhere for everybody to go a little bit crazy, and they're all going in the same direction. That's a lot safer than trying to stop it and having people going crazy when there's bikes going in two directions.
So if
Mad Sunday has turned into like basically one way across the mountain if you want to do that.
Yeah, and exactly. It's one of those ones where like I don't have to feel like if I go because Mad Sunday's been eliminated, I'm still going to get to, if I want to go over there and ride my motorcycle on the track as a spectator, that's still something I get to look forward to even in 2025.
It's there the whole week now. It certainly has been, and I assume that will carry on because it's just a sensible thing to do, and that's what's great about the Isle of Man. Everybody else would say that's insane. You can't do that, but actually, it's a safer thing to do. It's just safer to have everyone just giving somewhere for everyone to go a bit crazy. There's no houses up there, so you're not getting in anybody's way. You're not going to land in somebody's garden. If you crash, you might land on a sheep or a cow or something. But you can just go a little bit crazy and kind of get rid of your sort of, I'm a top racer kind of thing, rather than doing that on a two-way road where bad things happen.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Spurge. So you can ride the mountain. If you go, if and when you go, you can ride the mountain.
That's in my bucket list of things to do. I want to move on with the conversation now that I know that my Mad Sunday desires aren't going to be curtailed. But let's get into a word from our sponsor Moto, and then we'll carry on the conversation with Matt.
Okie doke, everybody. We're back here talking Isle of Man TT with our buddy Matt. There's something we wanted to circle back to, Matt, and it has to do with the competitors at the Isle of Man. You touched on this earlier. You sort of mentioned that MotoGP and World Superbike riders are often these sort of shredded balls of muscle that only eat white rice and imported fried crickets to stay focused, and they make $10 million a year, and they're really finely tuned athletes. And I mean, I'm making jokes, but I'm very impressed with the sort of physical condition and the determination and focus it takes to be a world championship motorcycle racer in MotoGP and World Superbike, et cetera, et cetera. But the Isle of Man is a different ball of wax, as you said. And it doesn't take a very keen eye to notice this, right? Like you talked about them being like, you know, plumbers or bricklayers or carpenters or whatever. And they just happen to be quite good at riding a motorcycle, and they don't mind the risk of the TT, and they can make some decent money. So who do you think, does one person stand out really as a sort of like emblematic or famous in history or current day, who's really just sort of emblematic of this Isle of Man athlete?
Right. Well, I mean, the obvious guy to start with is Michael Dunlop. So last year, June 24, he became the most successful TT rider of all time. Won his 29th Isle of Man TT. I think when did he start? I don't know. 20 years ago, something like that.
Now, right?
Yeah. So the riders at TT tend to be a little bit older. It takes a while to get there. It's a kind of mountain to climb. And he's from the Dunlop dynasty. I don't know how many people know about the Dunlop dynasty. There's Northern Irish racing dynasty. His father raced, his uncle raced, and his brother raced. And his uncle, Joey Dunlop, won until last year, was the most successful TT rider with 26 wins. So he surpassed his uncle. And it's a very tragic story. His uncle, Joey Dunlop, was killed in 2001, I think, something like that, in a road race, in a street race in Estonia, in Northern Europe. His dad, Robert Dunlop, was killed in the Northwest 200 in 2008, something like that. I might be slightly out on these days. And his brother, the younger brother, William, was killed in another Irish race a few years ago. So, I mean, it's that kind of gives you some idea of what these guys are dealing with, right? And he is just remarkable. He's a very unusual sportsman. He doesn't talk to anybody. He's just totally his own man. No PR people, no nothing. He does what he wants to do. And that's kind of another thing that I like about the TT, that it's not all PR gloss and everything, It's this guy who is just so committed, and this is what he wants to do, despite the kind of tragedy that's overtaken his family. He's still out there doing it, and still amazing. And just what kind of riders are these? So if you put Michael Dunlop on a short circuit race, he wouldn't do that well. But there's other guys. When you say
short circuit, you're talking about like a normal kind of like a track day kind of thing. If someone went to Brands Hatch,
Kota or Brands Hatch or Mugello or something like that, he's not going to be up there. He's not going to be up there because it's a kind of, I mean, in Britain, I would liken it the difference to like football and rugby, right? So I guess in the States it would be soccer and American football would be the two. They're kind of similar. There's guys running around with a ball on a pitch, but they're completely different sports. And just because you're good at one doesn't mean you're good at another. And I would say that TT riding is similar, TT riding versus short circuit racing around a purpose-built track. So Dunlop is obviously very brave, very committed, builds his own engines. I mean, can you imagine that? How many top racers still build their own engines? I mean,
but does he now?
Yeah.
He puts together his own, and does he, how much tuning is allowed? Like, is he actually doing his own, like, porting heads and that kind of thing?
Yeah. And he prepares, it's part of his business. He prepares engines for other people as well. Although if you were racing against him, you probably wouldn't want him to do your engine. My engine has just gone pop. What the hell happened? So he is an amazing, the story behind that family is just, obviously it's fairly tragic, but it's nonetheless remarkable,
right.
So he's
actually a quick sidebar. Sorry to interrupt you, but I actually went to Estonia a couple years ago, not to do with motorcycles or racing at all, but just on a holiday, on vacation. And when I was in Estonia, I was reminded by someone that was where Joey Dunlop died in a race, and I went to the memorial on the side of the road in Estonia to see the place, just because I know who Joey Dunlop is, and he's a famous guy. And I grew up watching videos about him and hearing about him. And so I went to the place, and it was a rainy day, and it was somber, and it was interesting to be there. But I guess a quick thing that I'd like, you talk about the dynasty of the Dunlop family, and how, and how committed Michael Dunlop is to this sport and to winning. I think it really says something that, and people I'm not the first person to make this comment. Joey Dunlop died doing a race on public roads in Estonia that no one cared about.
Yeah.
No, he only went to do that because he wanted to do it. He just like loved riding motorcycles and he was good at doing that thing. And he went there and he was racing and he slid off the road and lost his life. And you know, people who aren't into motorcycles will say that it's, you know, that it was a stupid pursuit and, you know, that was a silly thing to do. And of course that was bound to happen. But it really, I think anyone who really enjoys riding a motorcycle can really represent with that he didn't die under the you know, the spotlight of international fame or anything like that. He was at some chicken race in the middle of Europe, nowhere, and when just because he loved it.
I mean, I think that's an important. We'll carry on talking about all the different riders, the top guys, and you know, of now and past. But it's important. You know, a lot of fans love the TT. Quite a lot of motorbike fans think it should be banned. It should be ended. Should be terminated. Right. And an awful lot of non-motorcycle people think that because they think, how can this even be legal? You know, it's every year, 2-3 people die, you know, and there's only like 80 or 90 starters. So that's a pretty terrifying, you know, hit rate.
Statistic.
You know? But the thing that to me, it's a philosophical question. Are you free to do what you like with your own body as long as it hurts nobody else? Right. My feeling is you should be, you know, you should be free to do what you want with your own body as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. And these people are doing exactly that, like that. You know, if they crash, you know, now everything's spectator areas are controlled and so on. I think there's been 2 or 3 spectators killed in 115 years, whereas there've been 270 riders. So, you know, to me, that's it's a philosophical question. Do you believe that people should be allowed to do what they want with their own bodies without hurting anybody or not? And if you do believe that, then why would you say it's wrong that they do this crazy race, you know? So that's, I think, an important thing to get across. Carrying about other riders. Yeah. So the Dunlop story is amazing. There's a documentary that you can probably buy or stream it's just called Road, which is the kind of Dunlop story. Yes. And it is, you know, you will cry. You know, you will cry in it. It's just, it is pretty, astonishing. Other riders, Peter Hickman, who's the current lap record holder. So Dunlop comes from a road racing dynasty, from a road racing family from Ireland. They all start off on racing on the roads. So he's completely all about racing between the hedges and between the walls. That's what he does. Right. Then you've got guys like Peter Hickman, who came over there like 10 years ago for the first time. Because the problem is in British superbikes, you don't earn any money. There's no prize money in British superbikes. Zero. Right. So he'd kind of run out of road in British Superbike. He wasn't doing that well. So he couldn't get a good team. You know, it's that kind of chicken and egg thing. If you've not got a good bike, you don't get good results. And if you're not getting good results, you don't get a good bike. You know, he was like running out of money and he's like, the only way I can continue is by going to the TT. And straight away because he was a fairly, you know, top 10 British Superbike guy. If I go to the TT, they'll pay me to go. And the prize money, if I know I'll be good, the prize money will, you know, make it a worthwhile pursuit. So you've got these 2 types of rider at the TT. You've got the guys who are totally all about the roads, like the Dunlops and quite a few others. And then you've got guys like Peter Hickman, who races in British Superbike and then goes over to the TT. And you can see the kind of way they ride is kind of quite different. Can
you explain it a little bit? Because I don't know. That would be a nuance that I'm not.
I mean, when I watch Hickman, you can kind of see that short circuit commitment. Everything is very peel-in points are exactly the same every time. You know, everything is very precise, very flowing, whereas Dunlop, he's better than he's less. I think his merch logo is a bull, right? A raging bull with horns, because that's what because he just used to ride the thing like it was a rodeo bull, you know? It was just crazy. He'd just be kind of look like he's completely out of control and just wrestling this machine into submission, you know, while missing walls at 100 miles an hour by 3 inches, you know. Now he's a bit smoother, but you definitely see that in guys that have come from short circuits. They've just got a bit more of a smoother style, you know. Hickman is just beautiful to watch. He really reminds me of a Scottish guy who won quite a few TTs in the 80s and 90s, guy called Steve Hislop, who was also really good. At Donington, he broke Valentino Rossi's MotoGP record on a Ducati 996, you know, so he was a good rider. So you got these 2 different types of rider, basically the road racers who, that's what they do, race between the hedges. And then you've got guys coming over from British Superbikes. Who else I'm just looking at my list. who else are the main men now? A guy called Davey Todd, who's another. He won the British Superstock Championship last year, and won his first TT. So he's an precise example of another Hickman who kind of can do both, can race on short circuits and on long circuits.
Right. Can I ask a question of you, Matt? So, kind of backing up to when, we first started talking about the Dunlop family. And, one of the things you said was, you look at a lot of these racers and they get out there, but if you were to put them on a short circuit or, a closed course circuit, they're not going to be as competitive. How much of that is just because of the endurance aspect? You're talking about a 37-mile track. You're talking about 5 to 7 laps, that's a lot of miles.
I think it's literally how they're different types of racing, right? So kind of a lot of TT races, when they win a TT, they say, it's not dangerous. I'm only riding 90%. That's nonsense. If you could take away all the walls and everything and make it a nice smooth circuit, like Kota or Brands Hatch or whatever, everybody would go a lot faster. It'd be a lot faster than 135 miles an hour. But it just completely changes everything. Everything changes when you put the walls there. The way you go into corners is different. The one thing you want to do at the TT is you go in, if you want to stay alive, you enter corners late. That was always my thinking anyway, and I think it still is. You enter corners a lot later than you would on a short circuit. Because if you enter early, you're going to come out further out, right? If you go into a corner earlier, you're going to drift out more on the exit, because that's just the way it works with cornering lines. And you don't want to do that when there's walls on the outside, right? Because if you drift wide, you can't go onto the curb. You can't go onto the asphalt runoff. You can't even go into the gravel trap. You're in a wall. There's no, and generally you're traveling so fast that you can't just change your line at the last minute. If you go into this corner at 100 miles an hour and you're coming out and you're going towards that wall, it's not a lot you can do about it, because you're just going too fast to actually change your line,
I guess
so. Basically,
it's
just a different mindset, kind of. I mean, it's a different way.
Exactly,
of going through corners on a
it's a different mindset. It's just, I mean, if you took Marc Marquez over there, guy leading the MotoGP World Championship at the moment, and if you took him over there and he was serious about it, he would probably go faster than the guys there now. It would take him a while, but probably not a lot faster. And he wouldn't be riding in the same way. You ride in a different way. You just cannot ride like you do on a short circuit, because you'll die, Right. Because when you're racing, if you're a top rider at a short circuit, if you want to win a race at Brands Hatch or Kota or whatever, you've got to be absolutely on the limit. You've got to be that, an eighth of an inch away from crashing at every corner. And you can't do that at the Ironman. So it's a different kind of riding, So when some people say, oh, he hasn't got his elbow on the ground. Well, of course he hasn't, you know what I mean? Because you just can't ride like that. There's a reason why you can't ride like that, because you wouldn't survive.
So on the topic of the different riders, we're talking about sort of like riders who race in quote unquote short circuit or ride in Irish road racing. Why do you think it is that, and I feel bad pointing a finger, but he's a famous icon. I don't think he'll care much what I have to say. When you look at Michael Dunlop, for example, he doesn't look like an Olympic gymnast.
No,
exactly. Like he's like a little doughy. He's a little pale. He's got a kind of he's got a Northern Britain kind of look about him. Whereas, some MotoGP riders are like I said, they're just like 2% body fat. And but ultimately they can both perform incredible feats on a motorcycle, and maybe the forces of that a motorcycle is producing at the Isle of Man isn't quite as severe as like MotoGP or World Superbike, but it's pretty severe, right? I mean, they're still braking immensely. They're going 200 miles an hour down Solby Straight, and then they're jumping on the brakes, and they're like, they have to be strong people. Why don't they look the same? Like, I think, is it just happenstance, or?
I think you've got to be strong at the TT. You need to be fit, but you don't need to be that kind of Olympic athlete fit that you do at MotoGP. You need to be strong because, and it's no surprise that Peter Hickman's a big guy. He's tall and he's big. And
6'something. Yeah.
Dunlop isn't tall, but he's very thick, strong, thick set.
Stout,
he's got good muscles on him. He might not be an Olympic athlete, but he's got good muscles on him. because you need to be able to boss that bike around. I mean, you're talking about they're doing 200 miles an hour, then braking, but also they're doing 200 miles an hour, jumping from crest to crest on the road or from bump to bump. And quite often you can barely see because you're just being shaken around so much. So, the challenges are kind of immense, Yeah.
I was listening to, some of the Hickman commentary, and he was talking about through like one section, he was standing the whole, he's like, I'm not sitting down here. I'm actually standing up on the pegs this whole section. And I think that gets back to like what I was driving at, from my last question, just so the audience that's listening to this kind of gets an idea. Like if someone listening has never done a track day before, right? Like just never gone and done a track day. My first experience at a track day was, I only go out for 15 minutes at a time. And then halfway through my first session, I was like, I'm pretty tired.
Absolutely.
Like I'm ready to go in and stretch my legs for a minute.
After 7.5 minutes.
Right. And so then you think about like, the fast riders on Isle of Man are doing, 18 minute lap times on a 37 mile track. And they're doing it for multiple sessions at a time.
It's very intense.
It's gotta be so, and I mean, Matt, for yourself, like, what kind of physical rigor does this just wear out on your body with something like this?
I think when you're racing, you kind of, you're used to it, right? Like if I haven't ridden on a track for a few years now, but one of the last times I did, after 3-4 laps, I'm physically and mentally exhausted, especially mentally exhausted because you're just not used to it. But when you're racing, you're used to it. But at the TT, you do have to fight the bike a lot. You really have to. And you're talking about standing up on the pegs. They do that around a lot of the course because the bike is moving around, jumping around so much that if you sit on it, you won't be able to control it because you'll be getting bounced around as well. So you basically stand up on the foot pegs and you let your knees be your kind of body suspension. Right? It's like riding motocross or a dirt bike.
I say much more off-road style.
And that's literally what they're doing. They're kind of doing 200 mile an hour motocross with slicks, right? That's kind of what it's like. I mean, you cannot believe how you get bumped around, and you've really got to hold on. Yeah.
What's the name of that corner, Matt, where there's a famous corner where the riders come through and you go like down through a little dip and there's a wall on the left, and there's photographs of riders that we'll show on screen for those of you watching a video. There's the bike almost bottoms out, like the belly pan of the bike is against the ground. And the riders are standing on the foot pegs.
Yeah. That's a little place called Bagaro. So because it's a very ancient place, Isle of Man, it has a lot of ancient place names. So that's a part of the course, just before you go into the village of Kirkmichael. So there's Bagaro top, which is a kind of fairly straightforward left, right, and you plunge down this hill and it feels like you're going down a cliff, because you're approaching it very fast. And then there's this left-hander in the dip, and there's a wall on the left. Yeah. And then a hedge on the right on the way out. It's a left-hander, and everything just bottoms out. The suspension bottoms out. And as you say, the the center of the fairing is bottoming out on the...
Right.
And the
photos are staggering.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I only ever race little bikes around there, fairly slow bikes, because I didn't want to race anything crazy fast. And even on that, there's certain parts of the track where every lap you're coming up to it and you're dreading it. I mean, I'm not sure that people like Peter Hickman do. I think but like literally, and you're just telling yourself, right, don't shut the throttle. Don't shut the throttle. I'm going to do it flat out this time. I'm going to do it flat out. I'm going to do it flat out. And you're heading down towards that corner and you're just going to do it flat out. I'm going to do it flat out. And you're just coming up to it and your right wrist just starts closing the throttle by 2 or 3 degrees. And you come out and you go, I got it, and I've got to do it next time. Right. So, there's no other place in the world like that where literally for like 30 seconds or a minute before you get to that, probably 3-4 parts of the course were like that. And they're all super fast. And it's so, cause like, there's a corner called Balagary, fairly old in the lap.
Right.
It's called
Balascari, right?
Called Balascari, yeah. And it's like 140 miles an hour, wall on the right, no runoff, just people's garden walls on the outside. And you are flat out for about the next mile and a half after that. So if you can carry 2 miles an hour more through Balascari, you carry that 2 miles an hour all the way through for the next mile and a half. So it's absolutely essential to get through there as fast as you can, because the difference you can make is big. But if you get it wrong, it's over. I mean, people have crashed there and survived, but it's it used to terrify me. I mean, really.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I have another question that's going to make Spurge roll his eyes a little bit, but I can't help but ask, how is, considering we're talking about how bumpy it is and how you like stand on the foot pegs and you're wrestling the bike around, and because you're on public, like it's quite smooth in my limited experience in being on the course, it's quite smooth for a public road, but it's quite bumpy for a racetrack. So it's this interesting kind of, and certain areas of the track, as Spurgeon pointed out, are bumpier than others. And how does the bike setup work? Like, compared to the way a motorcycle like a BMW S1000 or a Honda CBR 1000 or
I'm not rolling my eyes at all. This is the kind of stuff that like,
you do love suspension.
You talk about suspension. So let's get into it.
So how do they? Does the bike have to be like? I don't know. Do they have like pretty significant suspension settings that are different suspension settings compared to a short circuit bike?
I think softer generally. I mean, I'm
softer,
not, in my experience, softer generally. But the problem is that you are dealing with every possible scenario. You go to a short circuit and, people will change their setup from this circuit to that circuit because this circuit is more of that than that circuit, which is more of that. But the TT, you have everything. You have everything. Right. You have jumps, you have slow corners, you have 180 mile an hour corners, you have bumps, you have manhole covers, you have, you know what I mean? So you have to come up with a very balanced, neutral setup because it's got to work everywhere. In every circumstance, you can't set it up for one corner. I mean, I remember, back when Valentino Rossi was doing MotoGP, like they would quite often set up, especially on the brakes, they would set it up, they'd decide which corner was the best overtaken corner, and they'd set up the bike for braking for that corner, literally so that he could make a move there because he had, the suspension just right at that corner, even if it wasn't quite right at every other corner. That was important because that's where you overtook. You can't do that at the TT. It's got to be work at 250 different corners, So
that strikes me, but it also changes too, right? Because like I remember like some of the commentary where it's like, okay, so it was during practice it was raining and there were wet leaves on the ground, so I had to be careful here. But today it's actually drier and there's no wet leaves and they've cleared it off. So I think even some of that mentality too of how when you're on a closed course, you're not worried about like, oh, there's oil. On the course, and they've thrown some cat litter over top of it. So we just have to make sure we're mindful of that as we're going through, this particular corner kind of thing.
There's so much more to think about. It's so much more random. So much stuff can happen there, and so you've got to have that kind of mindset to be aware that weird stuff can happen. Animals can get on the course, for example,
all those drunk punters that are,
I mean, I think that happened a couple of years ago. And they basically, if you do that, if you're a fan and you walk on the course, they put you in jail for a week. They don't mess about. They're like, right, you're in jail. Off you go. And that's it. There's no argument.
Are there any, well, first of all, I guess it strikes me, and this is more of a comment than a question, so we can move on after it, but it strikes me that having to set up a bike, so the suspension and the sort of basic setup of the bike, having that be so broad and sort of like accommodating because the course is so varied, that strikes me as the type of place where it really is like and we don't need me to say this, but a real like rider's test,
Exactly.
Like it's not about having the machine that has the suspension's just right because I got the Olin shock tuned. It's like you got to know the course and know where you're going and know what you're doing, which is like I think that makes it extra satisfying.
It's basically you get the bike about right and it's everything's up to the rider basically.
Right.
I mean you need a lot of horsepower. There's a lot of straights.
Yeah. That's another thing about that onboard Peter Hickman lap that blows my mind. Is like I know there are sections where you're basically wide open for like more than a mile, but when you're going that fast, it doesn't even last that long. It's crazy.
I mean, most people
fast they get through
the kind of standard comment when somebody watches an onboard like the Hickman thing, they're like, that's on fast forward. Don't be stupid.
Yeah,
it's on fast forward. And you're like, no, it isn't. That's of course it is. That's impossible. But it's not. No, that's normal. No way. And it is. It's just like it's. I always think of it like Star Wars. Warp speed when they press it. Star Wars.
Exactly.
And that's what it's like. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a buzz. Because on a short circuit, you've not got that kind of sense of speed because. Everything's quite far away. The walls are far away. The spectators are far away. With the Isle of Man, you are going. And that's one of the buzzes, that you just, the adrenaline, it would be interesting to be able to measure the kind of adrenaline shot, intake or production or whatever it is between a rider riding around a, Brands Hatch or Cota or whatever, or Silverstone, and a rider riding around the TT, because it is just, and that's why it's so addictive. People say, right. I mean, there was a couple of sidecar, I'm not particularly into sidecar racing, but watching them around the Isle of Man, it's just mind boggling. And I interviewed the Birchall brothers last year, and one of the passenger, he's stopped now because I've rolled the dice enough. He says that after TT week, he actually wants to kill himself. I mean, literally he's just, because life becomes so grey and so boring that he actually just doesn't want to live anymore. So I mean, that's the kind of hit that you're talking about getting. It's so massive that it's, once you come back from the 2 weeks of that, you find this is just too boring. Why am I even alive?
Well, I think
they're already looking forward to next year.
Right. I think it speaks volumes to the type of person that's out there doing this, right? And I know you've hit on that quite a bit, and I think to kind of wrap up the section where we're talking about the people that race this, I think a name that always kind of comes to mind, because he's done so much from a celebrity standpoint, but like you have someone like Guy Martin, who, is a truck mechanic and is going out and racing motorcycles. And I don't know if he ever actually won.
No, he didn't. I mean, he was second of quite a few times, and he, by like seconds, that's the, and also I think he was in the leading a couple of times and broke down. That's another thing that although the guys aren't together, because they set off 10 seconds apart, and invariably the guy you're racing for the win, you can't see him, so you're just, you'll have somebody giving you boards around the circuit telling you where you are. And, they'll be racing 6 laps. So that's an hour and a half or whatever. And they're on different bikes, on different tires. They don't see each other ever. And there's a pit stop in the middle, and there's 2.2 seconds between them at the end of the race. I mean, it's like, how is that possible? Yeah. It's astonishing. It blows my mind every
astonishing.
time.
So my question for you, Matt, is, let's say you're somebody out there that's a truck mechanic and you like riding motorcycles, or you're doing your regular job, and someone like yourself, you go, you see the Isle of Man. How did you end up racing it? Like, for how does the average person end up going from spectator or passive interest into, I'm actually going to become a career racer?
Change, Spurge?
I'm sorry.
You thinking of a career change for yourself?
Listen, man, I can only try and work with you for so long. I need to know what's next for me.
Speaking of wanting to kill yourself,
I would say it's already very depressing for me in life. I figure there's got to be a way out of this.
Nothing can be harder than doing this podcast. TT can't do that.
Exactly. Yeah, you've done it twice in the last year, Matt, so
I mean, I like most people. Not so much now, because most people start riding or racing when they're kids, don't they? But I got my first motorbike when I was 17. My brother started racing. I started racing when I was 20. I never wanted to do the TT because it was too dangerous. And then I was already a motorbike journalist by that point, road testing motorbikes. And in 1984, Motorcycle News, the British paper, I was working for them. They were sponsoring the production TT, for completely standard road bikes. They said, do you want to do it? And I was like, no way, way too dangerous. And then I was like, I said to the editor, what have I got to do? I'm over there for 2 weeks. Right? What else have I got to do? And they said, you've got to do the race and then write a story about it. So I'm like, wow, I'm there for 2 weeks. I've just got to write one story. That sounds really cushy. And so I thought, yeah, I'll do it. So I literally did it for the holiday and went over there and rode around the course and just thought, this is too dangerous. This is so scary. But I can't pull out before practice. I'm going to do a lap of practice and then say, look, this isn't for me. And I went out early morning practice. I used to have early morning practice in those days, which literally started at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. That's a good way to wake up, right? and
talk about a cup of coffee.
And I went out on my little Suzuki RG250, and I just had the best time I've ever had in my life. I mean, I'd grown up riding around.
First lap.
Yeah. I'd grown up riding around the country roads with my brother and some other mates, just being stupid and getting into all kinds of trouble with the police and stuff. And then suddenly I was doing that exactly, and there were no police, and everybody's like cheering you on and saying, go faster, mate. You're going into sort of 30 mile an hour little villages at 120 miles an hour. And it was just the best thing ever. I was just completely in love with it. It was just like, wow, this is just so
So
cool.
did you literally just you did your first practice lap, and then you pulled in after one lap?
No, I was going to. And say this
going
isn't for
to, but
me,
then you
but
did
I
a
was
second
already
lap and a third lap?
Yeah, I was all right. Wow, this is just the best thing ever. So I went from being, it was kind of strange. Yeah. And
Wow.
it's just, like I say, it's just
remarkable.
the biggest adrenaline hit ever. I mean, it's just, I loved it. And like I say, I only ever rode 250 production bikes and 400s as well, because I didn't want to ride anything too fast. And I wanted to ride production bikes because they're not going to break. You know, people at that point were racing Grand Prix two-strokes around there, you know, and then they're not built to be jumped over bridges at, 130 miles an hour or whatever, you know, and they can break, and they got two-stroke engines, Grand Prix engines. So I kind of did it the kind of easy way, if you like. I have no idea how they ride these 220 horsepower things around it. But I love watching it. And
so if someone listening to this isn't already a British motorcycle journalist, and they want to go, like, is there a way, like, can anyone just show up and enter?
No.
Okay.
So if let's say you're an American, you haven't even started racing, you'd have to start racing, you'd start at club level and then you work your way up. I don't know how it works with the licenses, but here in Britain, you have a club racing license, and then you get a certain amount of results, and then you get your national license, and you can compete in national events. And then you get a certain amount of results, and then they give you your international license. And that's what you need to do the TT. So you need to be, I mean, how long did it take me to get an international license? 3, 4, 5 years, whatever.
Okay.
So you're kind of looking at, it's not a short-term thing.
So even for someone like yourself, you couldn't just go and say, oh, I'm just racing because I'm a journalist. You had to have the experience.
Yeah, you got to have, and it's much more rigorous now. I mean, back when I was doing it, they kind of, I think it was also when I was doing it it's the mid 80s, and the TT had lost world championship status, Grand Prix status in the late 70s. So it was in quite a hole at that point. People were wondering whether it had a future, and it was
they take anybody as an entrant.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, they used to have a lot more entries then, because, there's fewer and fewer people that kind of want to do that stuff, because it's a very special thing. But I mean, it's, I mean, I always say, that you don't race for the risk, because, if you want risk, just buy a pistol, just buy a handgun and one bullet, and just play.
Spin the barrel, Boris.
Spin the barrel with your friends, right? and that's all the risk you need, right? But you have no control over what happens then. And the difference when you go racing is that you have control over what you do, and you have to, you have to be brave to start off with. You have to be a bit stupid to start off with, or having a lack of sort of imagination of what might happen if things go wrong. But then you have to work at it. You have to use your skill. You have to use your knowledge. You have to really work at it. It's not something that you don't just get on a motorbike and go tearing around the course. You have to be very precise. I don't know whether you've ever, I think most riders write lots of notes. I haven't got it anymore. A whole book, like every corner, what to watch out for. And, every session I'll come back and add another thing for it. Have you ever seen that film called Free Solo, about that guy climbing El Capitan?
Yeah.
And he's,
right.
And he's practicing for doing it without ropes, right? He's like half a mile up in the air, no ropes, climbing across this rock, basically.
Berserk.
And he was writing down all these notes about where this finger goes on that, you lean up to the right and you put your second finger in this little crack. And it really sort of chimed with me that it was a bit like a slow motion Isle of Man TT lap. The effort and precision that he was putting into everything was just, to me, and also the same thing. If it goes wrong, that's it,
Right.
Toast, you're not getting out of there. So there is a lot of work and a lot of, if you want it, the first thing to do is to stay alive. And the second thing is to try and win it. Right. And to achieve both those takes a lot of work. Yeah.
So there's only two things you have to do: stay alive.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Win.
Yeah.
Stay alive and win.
That easy.
Deal. Well, speaking of training and diligence and intelligence and studying, we are going to have you play the engine sound guessing game.
Oh no.
And I think that, this is you do have a whole career's worth of knowledge in your brain, and we hope that it helps you during.
I mean, you won the Isle of Man, so
how can it be?
How hard is it going to be to win?
How hard can it be? Well, I do think on the last note that I'll make here is something that came to my mind earlier as well when we were talking about that Peter Hickman onboard lap that we've referenced a couple times, and how he's making notes about everything and sort of like, yeah, you got to be careful. There's a little bit of paint there and there's a little bit of that there, and oh, this one goes off camber and blah blah. It strikes me that this is often said with sort of like more conventional sports like basketball, say. You see, or Olympic athletes, right, who win a sprint, they run 100 meters and they win a gold medal, and you think, wow, that looks like fun. That, that taking all the acclaim for that and, winning a race on the world stage or like hitting a 3-point shot at the end of a basketball game, to win the state championship or the world championship or the Olympics or whatever. And what people often don't appreciate is all of the work that goes into that moment, right? The player, the basketball player who shoots that basketball and makes the basket to win the game at the end gets a lot of credit for, the courage and the talent and the perseverance and the athletic ability to have completed that task. But what people don't appreciate is how many times they have shot that shot.
Exactly. Yeah.
How many times they've sat there and thrown the basketball at the hoop and thrown it up there and thrown it up there and thrown it up there and thrown it up there. And they've learned every time they've done it, every time they've thrown the basketball at the hoop, they've learned something and they've refined something and they've thought about something, and they've done it so many times that they can't even remember. And when that moment comes at the end of the game, when they chuck that basketball up at the hoop that time with the clock winding down and all the fans holding their breath and blah, 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 you have that sort of like rush, and it's amazing. And that's what I really get a kick out of when I see these riders ride around the course at that speed. It's just like knowing that it's like, it is so cerebral and so kind of like, like meditative almost, that like the zone they have to be in to do that.
One last thing, I think it's important to, and I'm sure not all riders are like this, but I know guys like John McGuinness, who's won 23 TTs. I know he's the same, and I know I was the same. The absolute state of terror before a race. Short circuit race, you're nervous.
Sure, butterflies.
Butterflies. But you're sat on the grid at the top of the Glencrutchy Road in Douglas before the start, and you're waiting for start, and you just want to roll over and die. You feel so ill. You want to vomit, you want to go to the toilet, you just want to do it, and you just want to curl into a fetal ball and die, because you're so scared. And I was, I'm not sure that everybody is, but like I say, McGuinness was, still is, he gets that scared. You just want to curl up in a ball and die, because you just want an end to this terror, and then the moment you start, that just goes. And I love that, as soon as you're going, that's all gone, because you're concentrating on what you're doing, But wow,
I think that's so scalable though too, right? Like I can't even imagine what you and other racers went through, because I've raced off road in like local enduro 70 miles in a sandy, New Jersey woods. And I'm sitting there at 7:00 in the morning, staring at the porta potty, being like, I think I have to go again. Like, my stomach is flip flopping. I am like, my friends all make fun of me because they're like, you've already gone to the bathroom 3 times, man. I'm like, I can't. It's like, and I think I can't even imagine going from like the tiny little off-road scale of racing that I have done to the world level of sitting at the starting line at Isle of Man and just the butterflies that must be ripping away at your tummy.
It's not
I agree.
Nice. Not nice.
My personal experience is I've done a lot of short circuit. We've called short circuit racing this podcast for that terminology, Matt. A lot of club racing, road racing, and Ari and I often joke that we always yawn before the races. We have this like feeling of wanting to go to sleep. You get tired. Yeah. And it's like, it feels like your body's like, no, don't do that thing. Don't go out on the track and race and don't do that thing that's dangerous. Let's just go to sleep. We're just going to shut down. You're just sort of like, that's how the nerves manifest for us, is sort of your body just kind of almost rejecting it as like a thing that you want to do. And like you point out, I can't even imagine facing, however many, 100 miles of of stone walls whipping by and that kind of thing.
Well,
It's gotta be
speaking
a real
of
rush.
nerves, Matt, you don't get a bathroom break before we move on to the engine sound guessing game. So hopefully you can make it through this without, any accidents. But so since the last time we had Matt on the podcast, the engine sound guessing game, which we're about to play, is now sponsored by Akrapovic. And Akrapovic is a exhaust manufacturer. They are a premium brand in exhaust. Zach has an Akrapovic exhaust. I have a Akrapovic exhaust because we're premium riders with premium machines.
We're premium podcast hosts.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're considering a new exhaust this riding season, check out Akrapovic and their full line of exhaust from street bikes to off-road. They've got you covered. And sometimes when you throw an Akrapovic exhaust on your motorcycle, it makes it harder for us to figure out what that bike is.
Indeed. So without further ado, Mr. Matt, please do press play on your your engine sound here. We'll all take a listen and see what we think.
This is
Crank up your stereo speakers at home, people.
This is going to be embarrassing. I know this. Okay, I'm going to listen. All right. Okay.
Well,
We should tell Matt again, Matt, from last time you were on, old producer Chase was being wily, and he would sometimes align the engine sound with the guest to try and give him a little bit of an edge. He has promised us that he's no longer doing that. So supposedly this is just a completely random engine sound.
Well, I mean, obviously it's an inline four, which makes it complicated because there's about 1 million different types of inline fours. So thanks for that.
Good way to put it.
I mean, I think it sounds so familiar. But I would say it's a reasonably old inline four.
Okay. I like
Just
that.
because
That's
it
a good
sounds
guess.
a little bit rough. It's not as sweet as you might expect a kind of modern one to be.
I like that guess. What about size? Does it sound like, 400, 600, 750, 1000?
It's I would say, it's larger capacity, I would guess.
Okay.
So, I mean, 600, 750 maybe, probably. Yeah. I don't think it's 1,000. It's a bit too...
You don't think it's 1,000?
No? Should I think it's 1,000?
I don't know. I think this is great. I think that you've given you've aligned basically with my thoughts on the subject, and it's going to be a very, very difficult one to pin down. But I think
you think it's a mid-sized displacement. You're not hearing liter bike here.
No, I think it's a bit too lively for a liter. But I'm obviously probably wrong. Oh my God, what am I going to? I mean, I was thinking it could be just something like a CBR 600 Hornet or something like that. I mean, how many?
Is that a CBR 600 in here in the United States? They don't call it the Hornet here.
No.
Okay, yeah. So a CBR 600. I mean, it. Oh, man, yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's do first hint, and then we'll do one more listen because the audience at home is screaming along too. So we need to give them another sound. So the first hint for those of you listening at home, as well as for Matt, Zach, and myself, is a transverse inline four, which doesn't really help us at all because we already kind of knew that.
Matt already knew that. It wasn't going to be a longitudinal inline four. That would have been easy to pick out, I think. All right, well, let's go ahead. From 1916.
Let's play it one more time for everybody, and we'll go back to trying to figure this one out.
All right.
Okay. Matt, like I say, it sounds so familiar. I can kind of see it, but I can't. I'm just going to have.
I think it's
guess.
a leader. I think it's a leader bike.
Okay.
I think it's. I think it's 1,000 cc's.
I mean, listening
it's
back,
big.
it kind of doesn't sound as revvy as I thought it did, but it doesn't sound like brand new. You know what I mean? It sounds like it's a little bit old.
It's not a Yamaha. It's not the cross plane. It doesn't sound cross plane.
No, definitely not.
Definitely not. So that leaves like a Honda CBR 1000, could be a Suzuki GSX-R 1000, could be a Kawasaki ZX-10, could be an older R1, could be an R1 that's pre 2009.
I mean, I'm gonna guess at
throw out a guess. We'll all throw out a guess.
Sort of GSX-R 1000 or something like that. You know, I don't know. I think it's a Honda. I think it's a. Yeah, I don't know. Oh man, I hate this.
Zach, what's your guess?
I like GSX-R 1000 a lot, actually. I don't think it sounds like a Honda starter motor, and it doesn't sound like a Yamaha starter motor. So I don't know. I like GSX-R 1000. I'm
going to go with that as well.
I'm gonna go against both of you.
I like it,
and I'm gonna say that producer Chase has not moved far enough away from his wily ways. I think Zach sent out a hot lap of Peter Hickman on a BMW S1000RR.
Okay.
I think in Chase's mind, he's just following the lines here. And
I like that the engine sound guessing game has become a psychological analysis of our producer and what we think he has actually done here. I was thinking initially it was going to be like an inline 4 from the 80s or something like that maybe Matt raced in the Isle of Man. But Chase said he wasn't doing that anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think it's maybe an 80s or 90s bike, because I don't ride loads of different bikes anymore. I don't test bikes for a living, so. But it sounded so familiar that I kind of think it must be from kind of my era.
It sounds newer.
You know?
It sounds newer than your era.
Well,
Not
80s, 90s.
Okay.
I'm very old. 80s or 90s, I think. 80s or 90s.
I appreciate your confidence, Spurge. Let's get. So is there one more hint, or we just get the answer?
We have another hint.
Put me out of my misery, please. Put me out of my misery.
We've already listened twice. Let's go down to hint number 2.
Okay.
Hint number 2. Model released in 2009.
Oh,
that's an S1000RR.
Is that? But I'm trying to figure out, is model released or just like the newest version of it? 2000? Because I think
that the BMW S1000RR came out in 2009, I believe.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I think you might be onto it there, Spurjo. I think you got it.
This isn't about the engine sound guessing game. This is just purely about, like, I've spent way too much time with producer Chase.
Yeah, you know Chase better than anybody. So let's reveal the answer. We don't need to have.
All right. So the answer is Jack sent in a audio clip of his 2018 BMW S1000RR.
There you go.
I was kind of very impressive.
Yeah.
Jack has an aftermarket exhaust on his bike. Doesn't tell us if it's an Akrapovic or not, but he has an aftermarket exhaust on there. And Jack says, I like to listen to Highside, Lowside while wrenching on cars all day. So thank you for making work entertaining. So there you go. Jack, thanks for sending in the engine sound guessing game. We will send you a t-shirt if you want to go ahead and shoot us an email over to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com, and we'll send you a t-shirt.
I now know why it sounded familiar, because last summer I borrowed is it the X1000RR? It's a kind of, we
XR?
sit up and beg.
The XR?
Right. And I borrowed one of them to ride down to the Goodwood Festival of Speed. And I think that's probably why it sounded so familiar to me.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. And I
think
it
was tickling that.
I think that bike might actually have an Akrapovic exhaust on it. As standard.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Isn't it?
How about that, everybody?
Look at you appeasing our sponsors.
I know now that we've done it, I know everything.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
you know where bread is
expert.
buttered, though, as a motorcycle racer. You have to keep the sponsors happy, otherwise you don't get to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, we have again taken up so much of your time that the nighttime has settled upon you. In England, it's a Friday night. I'm sure they're waiting for you down at your local pub.
Yeah.
And we're taking up too much of your time. But thank you so much for joining us again.
It's just really, really enjoy it. I just enjoy talking about motorbikes, so especially motorbike racing. So it's been pleasurable. Thank you.
And Matt, if people want to listen to your podcast, where do they tune in? How do they hear you on a regular basis?
My podcast is basically a MotoGP podcast. I mean, we do others. I do. It's called the Oxley Bomb MotoGP podcast. So Oxley. And then my podcast partner is a guy called Peter Bom, BOM. He's a world championship winning crew chief, Moto 2, World Super Sport Championship, Moto 3. So he actually, I pretend I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And we basically talk, we do it every Sunday, comes out every Sunday evening. You can just find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify, all the usual places. We've been doing it for a couple of years, and yeah, we really do it. And we really do enjoy doing it. And I think it's, we try and, rather than just talk about what we think, oh, why is this guy doing this? Why is this rider doing that? We actually try and talk about why, what they're doing to the bikes, what they're doing with their riding technique. So it's kind of, instead of telling you what happened, we're telling you why it happened, which to me as a journalist, that's always what I've tried to do. Everybody knows what happened. You want to know why. That's why you're in the paddock. That's why you're in pit lane, to find out why it happened. Right.
Yeah. That's the interest of your podcast, is that you guys are insiders and you see and hear and know a lot more than, just about anyone else who's watching or streaming on their TV. So, we will encourage everyone obviously to listen to your MotoGP, pod if, they have the time and the brain power to do so. We will try to come up with another excuse to have you on as a guest, because it's a real treat to hear about all your knowledge about history of the Isle of Man in this case. And yeah, thanks for spending your Friday evening with us.
It's like I said, it's been a pleasure, guys. Cheers, Spurge. Cheers, Zach, and cheers, Chase, as well, for the producer. Always have to thank the producer. It's been great, and we'll do it again sometime.
Cheers, Matt.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Matt Oxley, everybody. Give him a round of applause. I mean, really, Spurge, what a peach of a guest he is. He's got so much knowledge in that head. I feel like every time we have a topic with him, we're like, let's talk about the history of MotoGP or the history of the Isle of Man. And really what we need to talk about is like 1989, June. What do you remember about
give us
the
your stories? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just phenomenal. He's a great guy to talk to.
I can't undersell the kindness. It is, very late into the evening on a Friday night. He has, I'm sure, better things to do than be talking to us across the pond, if you will. Right. So thank you again to Mat Oxley. Check out his podcast. Also check out some of the books that he's written. I know I've talked about Stealing Speed as one of my favorites in the past. So support Matt. He is a true gentleman in the industry. As we jump into the couple other additional t-shirt winners here, there is something that I just want to throw out here as a quick aside.
Please do.
So Zach has recently befriended, and so have I through Zach, a gentleman named Tim. Tim works in the basketball industry, and we're going to go out and hang out with Tim here in a couple of weeks. But I'm noticing you're dropping in like basketball references to our podcast now. You were talking about like athletes doing like, how many times they're throwing free throws. I think you've been hanging out with Tim a little bit too much here. This influence is wearing off on you.
I played high school basketball. I wasn't very
good.
Know that. But I
thought you were a soccer player.
I played high school soccer as well, and high school baseball. I played every sport that my high school offered, because there isn't a lot to do in the middle of Vermont except play sports or do drugs. And I guess I didn't want to do drugs. I don't know.
Well, I just know that Tim listens to this podcast, and I'm sure he's going to be really, really
maybe he'll like the basketball.
The
basketball reference was not from our new, was not for our new friend Tim. I can promise you that. It was more it felt like hitting a 3-point shot at the end of a game is emblematic of sports heroism in a way that other people would be able to represent with, rather than when you something on a motorcycle. And, I guess it's a motorcycle podcast. I should have just stuck with that.
Well, talking about hitting a 3-point shot, for all of those of you out there throwing comments our way and reviews our way, some of you indeed sometimes get the basket or the ball into the basket. See, I'm not good at this the way you are. Like Tim's, I got to spend more time hanging out with Tim. So for those of you that may be tossing the ball in the air, the winner today for leaving us an Apple Podcast review, the person that's going to win a T-shirt, Zach, who's the winner today? How would you pronounce that name?
Well, it appears the winner just sort of mashed the keyboard when it came time to choose a username.
JB Dejabata digit.
Jibiva digit.
JBD JFJB TVU KEIDIGT. If you're listening, you just won a T-shirt. Why, Zach? What did they write?
Congratulations. Well, Achu said that, quote, I used to think I had self-control. I used to believe I was a man of reason, a man who could listen to a podcast without making impulsive life decisions. Then I found Highside, Lowside. 1 minute, I'm just casually listening to Spurg and Zack ramble about motorcycles. The next minute, I'm standing in my garage staring at a freshly purchased Honda VFR 800, wondering how I got here. Did I need a VFR 800? No. Did I even want a VFR 800 before this podcast? Debatable. Do I now believe it is the single greatest piece of machinery ever crafted by human hands? Absolutely. My wife calls it, quote, a problem. I call it, quote, a professional recommendation. 5 stars for this podcast. Would buy another motorcycle I don't need again. Well, so I wish you had your actual name, because this is a dynamite review. Very well written.
If you're new to the podcast, a VFR 800 is a bike that I've talked about quite a bit. And all I could think of is I think it was Step Brothers. When he was doing did I need a VFR? You know, do I believe it's now the single best piece of machinery? Like, did we just become best friends?
Exactly.
I think we did. Because you're making my case for me, and Zach oftentimes gets upset with me for bringing up Honda VFRs, but they're great bikes, and I'm glad that you went out and you bought something you didn't think you needed, but you found out you did.
Indeed. Well, if you recognize the words you wrote, you can send your mailing address and preferred t-shirt size to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. And if it'll make your wife feel any better, we'll even throw one in for her too. So
I was going to say, maybe if you give her a t-shirt, you'd be like, hey, it's not a problem. I'm getting this free clothing for us. You know, we can clothe our family based on the fact that I listen to this podcast with these two random dudes.
I'm putting shirts on our back. You got to spend money to make money.
All right, let's move on to the Highside, Lowside comment. And this is one that I think is, it's close to my heart. Because I would say so. I am a KTM owner. Zach is a KTM owner.
True.
But this is someone that I think there's been a lot of KTM news out recently. If you're not following along, or maybe you're just not following up with motorcycle news, KTM has gone through bankruptcy hearings. They've had a financial hard go of it. They've gone through some restructuring. And John sent an email in. We're not going to read your entire email, John, because you get a lot of questions here. I would recommend consulting a bankruptcy lawyer for some of this stuff. But I thought some of your questions were really good. They're pertinent, and they are things that Zach and I are thinking about. And they're also fundamental to some of the articles we've been writing on Common Tread. So John's email starts off by saying, at the end of 2023, I purchased a discounted KTM 890 Adventure R. Many months later, I found out that the discount was due to overproduction, and soon after, KTM filed for bankruptcy. I feel like there are a range of related topics that could be explored that are not generally dealt with by the media, such as, and then he goes on
to list a bunch of questions.
A bunch of questions.
Some of which you'd like to address, so please do.
I'd like to start off by saying, John, I too bought a KTM 890, but a year sooner than you did. I bought mine in 2022 at the highlight, the high point of the pandemic, where I spent not a discounted price. I spent a lot of money on a KTM 890 rally, and I don't buy motorcycles for investments, but I sure as hell lost out on this one if I would have. I also think it's important to note that manufacturers do this all the time. They offer rebates on motorcycles where it gets to the end of the season and they've got to move some units and there's rebates. Yeah. I had a KTM 1090 before the 890. There were $2,000 rebates that started getting offering. You know, I bought my bike and then the $2,000 rebates came out. So I was on the losing end of that one too.
Yeah, it's a common thing. It does seem like John in the email says, I found out that the discount was due to overproduction. And it sounds like John might feel a little bit hard done or like a little bit salty at KTM being like, well, we made too many of these, so you can have a little bit of money off. But this is very common. It is, in fact, quite common for brands to have, or not quite common, but not uncommon for brands to have, for example, a 2022, a 2023 model year, not a 2024 model year, and then the bike, there's a 2025 model year. And it's not because they stopped making the bike. It's because they made enough of them that they didn't need to make more in 2024. So all the VIN numbers on showrooms in 2024 will be 2023 bikes. You could say that it's overproduction, or you could just say it's sort of like how they do business sometimes. It's not the end of the world.
We just ran an article on Common Tread recently around there's a bunch of MSRPs that are dropping. There's a bunch of manufacturers that are actually just lowering MSRPs right now to make certain motorcycles more affordable in their line. So I would just start by saying, John, I don't think anything nefarious or out of the ordinary was going on with this. This is something that I started my career in motorcycling selling at a dealership in 2010, 2011, and this was going on. This was going on when I was buying motorcycles, 20 years ago. But it's
John's point about KTM being on rocky ground is
so there you go. So shifting gears,
Yes.
what can one of the other questions that John had was, what can a motorcycle company do as part of the bankruptcy? Can they cancel warranties? Can they stop producing spare parts? Can they stop supporting electronics? Yeah. Like, to my knowledge, like if a company goes out of business, like this is all stuff that can potentially happen. I do think it's important to note, John, I don't have the exact date in which your email came in. You talked about how some of these topics are often ignored in the media. I would like to say I'm pretty proud of how we've covered a lot of this over on Common Tread.
That's right.
If you are looking for some good reading this weekend, KTM survives. Creditors greenlight a restructuring plan. This was published on February 26th of 2025. Over on RevZilla's Common Tread. The point here is that KTM has not gone bankrupt. They are restructuring. They did part ways with MV Agusta. They've let MV Agusta go as part of their ownership group. That was covered actually in an article back on February 6th, which was Industry Update. Major manufacturers mostly report sluggish 2024 sales. In that article, Lance covered the fact that as part of this preparation for restructuring, KTM did let go of the MV Agusta brand.
Right.
John goes on to ask, is it worth buying a heavily discounted leftover vehicle? Zach?
Well, I mean,
you had a great analogy earlier, so bring it to the public. Donuts, Zach, donuts.
If you see a trash can in a friend's house, and inside is a box, and inside the box is a donut, that is it garbage or is it a donut that is available to eat? This was covered in a Seinfeld episode years ago. This is why I bring it up. I think that this is the question about, like, some people, that's garbage and they would not eat it. To the George Costanzas of the world, it's just a donut sitting in the trash can, and it could be eaten if you want to. You know who had their hands on it. It's fine. I think if you want to buy a heavily discounted leftover vehicle that you feel like is from a company that is on shaky ground, or you feel uncertain about some aspect of the financial foundation of the sanctioning body or company that it's coming from, you can either think that that's a great deal because you're getting a good discount, or you can think that it's really dangerous because you're buying something that's a quote unquote bad investment. And I don't think that we can tell you how to feel about that.
Who amongst us hasn't eaten a garbage donut? I mean, let's be honest.
I am a George Costanza of that
100%. 100%. If you're hungry in the middle of the afternoon, you find it. It's free reign. So I would say, I'll take this one step further, John. I have bought discounted leftover vehicles. I've actually gone down a darker path than that. I bought two press release or press loaner vehicles out of fleets, and there's no one that beats the hell out of a motorcycle more than a journalist that has no repercussions for what they're about to do for the next 1,000 miles before they hand that motorcycle back over and move on to the next one. So I bought a Tiger. My Tiger 800 had like 5,000 miles on it when I bought it out of a press fleet. My KTM 1090 was bought out of a press fleet. So for me, I think it's a personal weighing of, what you want to spend, how you feel the bike is maintained, and then really the enjoyment out of it. I was talking to Lance the other day. I'm not mad that I lost a considerable amount of money on my 890 Rally, because I'm going to keep it for another 10 years. I love that bike. It really is the pinnacle of what I'm looking for. So I'm not too worried about that. The final piece here that I think it would be fun to hit on is that KTM is likely to get back on its feet in one form or another, but at what cost to the previous consumers of their products? What about companies that permanently fail? For example, Sondor. And I think KTM is not a company that's going to ultimately fail. I think they've proven that, right? They've gotten back on their feet. But Zach, you're a KTM owner. I'm a KTM owner. John, you're a KTM owner. Like, what cost has this done to the consumer at this point in your mind, Zach? Like, do you feel like somehow you've been failed by your motorcycle manufacturer?
Not really. I don't know. I mean, my KTM is so old and I've had it for so long that I don't know if I feel particularly connected to the modern state of the company, to be honest. I think that the consumer confidence is the issue here, right? And this is the baseline of John's email is sort of like, how worried should I be about companies that are going through this kind of thing? And I think everyone's asking themselves that same question about KTM. I think even if you're not a KTM owner, I think there are probably lots of people out there that are KTM fans, whether you like rooting for Brad Binder in MotoGP or you're a big Ryan Dungey fan or whatever it is. KTM is a sort of a blue ribbon motorcycle brand in my mind anyway. And I think we all have this notion of sort of like, ooh, yikes, if this could happen to KTM, could it happen to other companies? Could it be a bellwether for bad things in the motorcycle industry? And I am preferring not to, I don't want to bury my head in the sand, but I'm preferring not to think of it that way. I'm preferring to think of it as something that, a miscalculation, a bobble, a bump in the road for a major brand, and something that the company will recover from and the industry will recover from as well, and won't be, in the end, won't be a huge deal. But the truth is, we don't know.
Yeah. And John, I would just say, for myself personally, throughout this, I've had a lot of, calls from friends and fellow KTM owners that have said, are you worried about this? Are you worried about not getting parts? Are you worried about X, Y, Z? And there wasn't any point where I was like really losing too much sleep over this. I like the motorcycle that I have, and worse comes to worse, there's still going to be enough spare parts laying around to support it. I will. Good.
And also Spurgeon has an infant in his household, so he's already losing sleep. He's not going to lose more sleep.
Yeah, I'm only putting like 100 miles on this motorcycle a year right now because I'm too busy changing diapers. I will just throw out one last commentary article for you to read, because we actually started covering some of this story back in 2024.
Indeed.
We published an article by Liz Canary titled KTM's Infamous Camshaft Issue, One Rider's First Person Account. And this was a story that I actually championed for. I think it's important to get the good and the bad out there. Liz is a friend of mine. She owns a 790. One of her bikes was one of the ones that was affected by the camshaft issues that so many people are talking about with KTM. We were actually able to interview some of the mechanics involved here. So if you haven't read it and you want to see how far back we have been covering the KTM saga, check out KTM's Infamous Camshaft Issue, One Rider's First Person Account. We'll throw all these links in the YouTube description or somewhere so that you can easily find the articles.
The good news is, John, your KTM 890 Adventure R might only be worth the two nickels you're rubbing together, but you get a free t-shirt out of this for sending us an email that sparked a little bit of conversation. So thank you kindly, John, via email. Please do send your preferred mailing address and your t-shirt size to Highside Lowside at RevZilla.com. And you can proudly wear your Highside Lowside t-shirt as you explain to all your Honda and Yamaha owning friends why you own a KTM.
Just a reminder to all of you out there, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We are reading the comments that you're putting through on Spotify. And in some cases, Zach and I are jumping in and responding to you directly. And as always, shoot us an email to highsidelowside at RevZilla.com with your engine sound, with your commentary. If you have a opinion on what iconic bike we should pick for the Bike Icons episode, shoot us an email. Let us know what you're thinking and why. And I believe this takes us to the end of episode 2 of season 10, Zach. And it's always a good time having Matt on the podcast, but I'm interested, what was your biggest takeaway? Did you learn anything new today about the Isle of Man?
Well, this is very specific and a little silly. I'm just going to call it out in case you missed it, in case you had gone to the restroom and not paused our podcast for some reason and missed this factoid. That whole thing where they spread lime on the roads in Isle of Man way back when, and there were guys racing around on motorcycles, and the acidity in the lime was getting kicked up and landing on their skin and their clothes and burning the skin off their bodies and burning the threads out of their clothing. I mean, that is just staggering. That's one of those things that it's really hard to imagine, I don't know, loving something enough or being determined in this day and age.
Eyeballs?
I mean,
I didn't bring it up with Matt, but I'm like, that's all. I'm like, what about your eyes and your mouth and breathing this in?
Goggles? Like, who knows? They probably all died of some sort of horrible lung disease. I mean, it was just like one of those little snaps. That's one of the reasons I love talking to Matt is he always has like a little anecdote or story like that you're sort of like, I can't even believe that's true. That's just such a, it's such a stake in the ground for how history and how much determination of past generations has led to the present that we live in today. Just
so
amazing.
Speaking of the past leading to the present, my big takeaway here was, in preparation for this, I did go back and I reread Ari Henning's article from August 9th of 2019 titled Ari and Zack Race the Isle of Man, but not in the TT.
Right.
It was a great article. It was a great trip. This was back in the past when you were working for Moto Trend before you came in and joined the ranks of RevZilla full time. The video is out there. You actually there was a video, and I believe it's all up on, is it on HBO Max?
HBO Max.
HBO Max. So if you're an HBO Max subscriber, you can watch the video. There is a 5-minute teaser in the article. So if you want to get a taste of what this was like, but the article, like, my takeaway here is I want to go to the Isle of Man and I want to ride dirt bikes across the cow paths.
And here's the thing, you can, because it's not, we did that as a Motor Trend production, and we spent a bunch of Motor Trend's money, on Discovery Channel's money on that trip. But you can totally do that. You can go and rent a bike probably from the same guy we did, and you can probably pitch a tent in his backyard and sleep there if you want to, and go to the grocery store and buy potato chips and oatmeal and just watch the TT and hang out and ride dirt bikes around the island. As far as I understand it, that is absolutely something that Joe Schmo can do. There were other people that were there doing it, and they weren't making a video. They weren't getting any special treatment. We just went, we got the bikes from the guy and did the thing. And he sort of gave us a little tour, look around because we needed help to make sure that we saw the right places for the sake of our video. But you can absolutely do it. And you should, Spurge. You would love it. That would be the dream for the Spurge and Dunbar, to see the Isle of Man TT.
These photos look awesome. Like, it looks like
incredible.
there's certain sections. I know I said cow paths, it's probably more like sheep paths, but like there's some of these mountain roads and like muddy ruts where it looks like a proper like dirt bike track across the middle of the island.
Yeah. And I mean, the one last story I'll leave you all with, which I kind of wanted to tell to Matt, except it wouldn't have done much to blow his hair back. But the very first time I ever saw, it's in the episode that's streaming on Max, so you can go watch. But we had cameras rolling the very first time Ari and I ever saw a bike come by at the Isle of Man. And we rode down these dirt roads from this guy's place and out to this little place where there was a corner marshal, and there were only a couple people there because it's a really hard place to get to. It's right in the woods, on the sort of, which side of the island? I guess the north side, maybe. As the racers were heading into Ramsey, I believe. And, we get out there and we're sitting there waiting, and practice has started, but the bikes aren't on track yet. And you can start to hear bikes, right? And you're just sitting in the woods on this island in the middle of the Irish Sea, and nothing's happening. The wind's blowing through the trees, and there's people, and you can see sheep over in a pasture somewhere. And then you just start hearing, and you're like, whoa, what is that? It's like, sounds like a mosquito flying towards you almost. And then pretty soon a modern sport bike at absolutely full chat, like squirming around and wheeling out of the corner, comes by at like 4th or 5th gear and just whistles by and disappears and goes down past a barn and hits the brakes and turns into another corner and is gone. And it is one of the most incredible motorcycling experiences that you can have. And I want you to have that, Spurge. So I want you to do it.
Well, I can't think of a better way to leave the audience with than those sound effects that Zach just made in your ears.
Maybe we'll actually play the real thing so you don't have to.
No, I think we have, if nothing else, audience, we've left you with this episode with plenty of articles to go check out over on Common Tread. Hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation about the Isle of Man TT with the one and only Mat Oxley. Until next time, Highside, Lowside listeners, thank you so much for spending your time with Zach and I today.
Cheers, everybody.